I'd like to welcome everybody to this evening's presentation of Murder, Mafia, and KKK Mayhem in Centerville, Iowa. We were approached by Enfys to give this as a fundraiser, for her to give this as a fundraiser for us, and so I want to tell you how much we appreciate Enfys and how much she promotes Appanoose County history. She's wonderful for the Historical Society. And I also want to thank Dan Wilson for arranging for us to use this great historic building. I love this building. I think it's wonderful. Enfys has been researching for years, and she's read every item by the front row on microfilm, and she's interviewed countless number of people for her upcoming book, Centerville, A Saga of Mid-America. So I'd like everybody to help me welcome Enfys McMurry.
On February the 5th, 1909, there was a rape and murder of a woman on Gara Street in Ottumwa. The victim was a young woman of 29 years old. She was a devoted member of the Swedish Lutheran Church in Ottumwa, and she was white. The man charged with the offense against her was John Junkin. He was 26 years old, a graduate of the penitentiary and almost every orphanage that you can imagine. And he was black. No sooner was he charged in Ottumwa than mobs tried to get in at him. They moved him to Albia. Mobs tried to get into him in Albia. They moved him to Des Moines. Mobs again. To Sigourney. Mobs again tried to reach him. And Senator Cornell, who was the county auditor for Wapello County, he said, "I think this trial should be conducted in Centerville." There is no mob mentality there. So the trial was held here in May of 1909. They brought John Junkin on a night train. It arrived at the station here about 3:22 in the morning. There were rumors that mobs were going to be on the train as well. A group of people in Centerville volunteered to be at the railroad station. They met the train. They brought him up here to Centerville. They put him in the city jail. And immediately there was a new rumor. 250 men on horseback were coming from Ottumwa across the country, and they were arriving on the northeast part of Centerville. Immediately people in town volunteered to sleep in rotations guarding John Junkin in the city jail. The Sheriff Clark, was determined that this man would have, at least in terms of 1909, a fair trial. There was, by the way, little doubt that he was guilty. So if you're feeling emotions, of sympathy for him, you can feel sympathy, but he almost certainly did the crime. John Junkin was rushed into the courthouse very early in the morning of his trial. He was taken to the very north, let me get my orientation right, northwest corner where there's a room on the top floor. And then he was brought by this passage right in to stand before Judge Roberts. There were a large group of people around the doorway. He was very nervous that again they would turn into a mob, but they did not. The trial was conducted, it lasted a week, and his defense attorney, who was another judge by the name of J.C. Mitchell, this is his defense attorney, stood up and addressed the court before he started, and he said, "Now you all need to know I'm from the state of Virginia. I agree with them about the position of the Negro, and I believe the 15th Amendment, which is what gave African Americans the vote, is the worst thing that ever happened in American history." This is before he's defended it, right? And he says, because it put him on an equal par with white men, and of course that is not possible. Among the witnesses was Professor H.J. Hove from Drake University Medical School. Mr. Hove stood up and addressed the court, and he said, "I've made a study of 100 skulls of well-known criminals in America. That's my expertise. Now he said, take a good look at this man. And he made John Junkin stand up in the court, and he said, everybody look at where his ears come on the top of his head. Look at the distance between his eyes. Look at the size of his neck. Look at the size of his head. Look at the length of his arms. You must understand this man is little more than an animal. It's going to get worse. John Junkin was found guilty, and Sheriff Clark got a 50-foot, 3/4-inch hemp rope from Davison's on the north part of the square. And John Junkin, when he was found guilty, and people started cheering at that doorway, Judge Roberts shouted, "Stop this nonsense." John Junkin was rushed down these stairs right outside this door. A mob was beginning to form on the north lawn, and it was the first time that there was any danger to John Junkin at all. He was rushed to a waiting interurban train that would take him down to the railroad station, and he was put on a train straight to Fort Madison, where on the 29th of July, 1909, he was executed. Before he was hung, he apologized to his mother for all the trouble he caused her, and he admitted to the crime and how it had occurred. He was hung, and he had donated his body to this professor up at Drake University. There was a medical school there then. Professor Ho removed the brain from the body and proceeded to give lectures all over Iowa and the Midwest, pointing out to people with photographs how John Junkin's brain was smooth at the outside. It wasn't convoluted the way a normal human brain is. I would imagine if he was hanging upside down, the blood would have rushed to that area. However, he then proceeded to say, this is proof, everybody, that this man is, wait for it, a baboon. Now, this is 1909. There were 486 African Americans in this town at that date. It had been fairly peaceful for African Americans in Centerville right up to about 1900, but there was a definite change around about 1900. Jim Crow laws were coming up across the border, and Iowa's law, which actually prevented discrimination, was being broken wholesale. There were advertisements in the Iowa region, whites only need apply. This was against Iowa law at the time. So John Junkin then, his life over, he came from Smoky Row, which is a notorious part of Ottumwa, and Clara Rosine, who was the name of the victim, very beautiful, her father a prominent businessman, but her life over as well. Now, from 1880 to 1940, the primary economic base of this community was coal. And it's because of the coal mines that all the immigrants began to arrive in this town. They'd been arriving for 20 years before the John Junkin trial. And there'd been discrepancies, and there were fights, and there were family feuds, and there were murders. There'd been a hatchet murder in Mystic. A whole family was killed at the Drum and Monkey mine. There were shootings